Okay. Welcome everyone to Me, Myself and I exhibition talk. I'm Rosalind Davis, I'm the curator at Collyer Bristow Gallery, and I'm delighted to have you with us and some of the artists in the show. The show started in February, but unfortunately because of COVID, it went into lockdown, and eventually we needed to take the work out of the building because it wasn't in use. Normally we would get the chance to have lots of the artists together, and I do private tours and talks throughout the show. And although it's over, we still wanted to have this conversation on Zoom, which is being recorded, just so you're aware. And we'll go on to YouTube or other platform at a later date. So if somebody's missed it or you want to forward it on, then please do. Thank you all for coming, as I say. Just for those of you I know will not have been to the gallery necessarily, particularly in the case of during lockdown. Collyer Bristow Gallery is a gallery and a law firm. And it's been going for 28 years and is about supporting and championing artists with a focus on early career artists, and how I approach that is to sort of combine early career artists with, say, somebody like Kiff, who's in the image on the left-hand side. So there were 20 artists in the show, 45 artworks, and today the format I'm going to be using is essentially to take you on a tour that I would have taken you on if I was in person. So forgive there being a PowerPoint and not loads of live videos or virtual galleries, but I'm lo-fi. Also as well with Me, Myself and I think with every show that I curate, I want it to be resonant of a time. Now, obviously we didn't know that COVID was happening, but I just found it very interesting that it started to resonate in very different ways, which is some of the things I wanted to talk about. But Me, Myself and I essentially is from a song and about identity, and it is very much about self-enquiry and expressions of the interior self, as well as that sort of represented in the exterior. So it spoke to lots of lived experiences of recalling personal and political struggles, family relationships and memories of childhood across all kinds of artworks and art forms. The show reflected on freedoms and solitude, collectivity and belonging, disenfranchisement and loss, which just even saying those words is particularly poignant, and people grappling with the sort of complexities of identity, of selfhood, and trying to find your place in the world. Yeah, and it's become much more political than I intended, in the sense of what is being presented and how, as I say, it resonates. I keep saying that word. It's hard to find another one that says it, but also very subdued. You know, the show was open for very short length of time in a way, and I sort of imagined all these artworks just consoling each other in this empty space, and very isolated, which further sort of emphasised that theme. Starting with Charmaine's work. Oh, sorry, actually Wendy, first of all, actually. But we'll come back to Wendy. But Wendy is a fantastic artist, and she was positioned here in the gallery as a sort of watchful face. But we'll come back to Wendy as well. Paul is going to speak a little bit about her work. But yeah, she was by the library, this kind of portrait of knowledge that is in Wendy's work. An expression yet no features. They're very powerful pieces. So we'll come back to, obviously most people had multiple works in the show, or they'll talk about one or two of them. So that's Wendy's, and there's another triptych in the show, so we'll come back. But at the very beginning of the gallery, in the reception area, were these two powerful drawings by Charmaine, which are about heritage, family, identity, and the wider mysteries of the universe, and her memory stories. And again, sort of reading it in slightly different ways. I mean, Charmaine, would you say a few words about them, but maybe we can talk a bit about how they say a little bit more than maybe your original intention was, given the times that we're in.
Yes, interesting. The three women on the left, by the way, they're all life-sized drawings, and I draw myself, but I don't view them as self-portraits. I use my image as a vehicle to tell stories, wider stories about cultural diaspora experience. So the three figures on the left, I made that work. I started it at the end of 2016. And at the time when I started that work, I didn't feel that there was enough said about my parents' generation who came here in the 60s to help rebuild post-war Britain. And I was inspired by, found a passport of my mum's, and in it, it says to allow the bearer to pass freely without let or hindrance, and to afford the bearer protections where necessary. And that really stood out for me because that wasn't their experience when they came here. So I kind of used the three graces as a trope to kind of map a story of arrival, settlement, and you know, just wanted to kind of expand the experiences of them living here. So it's kind of a combined memory piece. So it's combined with my memory, my generation's memories, with my parents' experiences. So the figure on the right-hand side is the young maiden setting out on her journey to kind of, you know, fulfill this dream of making a better life. The figure in the middle is the person who's settling here, but is going through a lot of difficulty and discrimination. And I kind of remember a lot of kind of protests and marches when I was growing up. So that's kind of very much, you know, we're here in spite of the fact, you know, that we're going through all this pain. And the figure on the left is, I see her as the crone, the wise woman, you know, who's gone through all these experiences and have now kind of come to the point where she's thought, well, you know, this is my home now, and, you know, I'm here, I'm settled. But at the time I made this work, I felt quite uneasy. So I put that figure in armour. And about a year, 18 months after I made this work, the Windrush scandal broke. So it was very timely, and it speaks a lot to what's happening now. Or rights movement. So yes, who knew? And the figure on the right, I, as a kid, was a real Star Trek fan, a bit of a nerd, and I've always asked big questions about the universe and how it works and our place in it. And I'd started this drawing basically as a response to another drawing. So it's actually, I imagined that it was going to be something completely different. But I had drawn this figure with these strange hand gestures, and I didn't know what to do with the hand gestures. And I woke up one morning and I thought, I'm going to put a cat's cradle on it. And once I did that and painted a black dress, I realized that I was talking about how I see the universe unfold, this kind of endless kind of repetition. And I thought that it's quite an elegant way of describing the universe unfolding by this cat's cradle, but it also connects to memory, personal memory, like a childhood memory, but also when you look up into the night sky, we're looking back into history. We're not actually seeing the sky as it exists today. We're looking into the past. So, you know, it kind of functions on both of those levels.
Yeah. Wow. And then also I sort of feel that idea as well of the kind of the strings being so taut, but at any moment you collapse, and that fragility that feels very like now, what's safe, what's security, what's, you know, what's going to collapse underneath us almost at the same
Yes. Yeah, that's right. I know.
It's a very yeah, it feels very of the moment in that sense of those other elements too, and what you're saying about, you know, you're looking at the sky but you're looking at the past. Part of becomes quite poignant sort of with the other works in the show too. You know, sort of like,
yes,
really, you could, it's almost as well like a glass ball, as if she's looking into the future, that sort of feeling of that in the you know, looking at the past.
Yes, because that tension is almost a tension that we're all feeling now, because we're wondering, you know, is this the new normal, having to wear masks all the time? And, you know, there is that element of the unknown as well. Things are unfolding, but we just don't know where we're being led. And that is interesting as well. Yes.
Will you be making works that will be about this sort of period of time now?
Well, I've recently been in a show which has been very cosmological. It's kind of continued on the cosmological theme, and in a way, it's my response. It's not an obvious response to what's going on now, but I feel that the period that we're in is, for me and many people that I know, has been a time of reflection, and I wanted to kind of do something that was a little bit more cosmological, bit more spiritual, dare I say, because I know it's not always a word that's kind of popular in the art world, but for me, I thought it was important to kind of go inward and reflect, and also kind of look at ancient knowledge, because for me, there is something about the notion of ancient knowledge that somehow, because there was more of a connection to the universe and to nature, there are things that we used to know back in the past that we don't actually know now, that we have to relearn in order to take ourselves forward. You know, it's that kind of a wider connection, because when I look at ancient cultures, a time before the colonial construct, there seems to have been more of a kind of connected belief system, a kind of connected way of seeing ourselves in relation to the universe and our environment. There seems to be this common thread that runs through all cultures, and I'm interested in that. I'm interested in the specifics of, say, African and Caribbean heritage and belief systems, but I'm also interested in the belief systems that are ancient, that connect us all together. So it's quite interesting, those kind of dual things, and those are the kind of things I'm quite excited about exploring a bit more of.
I look forward to what comes.
Yes.
We'll move on to another kind of ritual that connects us all, birthday parties. This is a painting by Will Harman. And although his work is usually quite humorous, as you can probably tell or see or read, particularly during lockdown, when, you know, kids had to be separated and not having birthday parties, it feels like it's hitting upon a different sort of visual diary of times gone past, and the joy of these little celebrations being so limited and nerve-making. And although we're now allowed out, and well, at least there's only 6 of them, right, in that painting. There's a rule of 6. Well done, Will. Very prophetic. But you're sort of wondering about what impacts this will have on generations of, you know, children that have missed out on schooling, and how they've had to be quite resilient in that way. So, and there's just a little install shot of it on Collyer Bristow Gallery wall there, which equally the memories of childhood we hit upon as we walk around the gallery on this virtual tour. Margarita's piece, which is again a sort of a character from a child's TV series, but it's a particularly the creature Cheberushka was basically a refugee, he was packed in a box of, I think it was fruit, and he was then, when he got to, I think it was America, but rejected by the zoo because he wasn't a known animal, and he had to serve as a window display for a shop selling factory seconds. So he was displaced too. He's a very famous character, and actually it's been sort of taken under the wing of sort of China, and like taking on that kind of characteristic. But I thought the idea of displacement and dislocation and his sad fate to be also particularly, relevant now in terms of refugees trying so desperately to get here before Brexit, and the lives that are sort of struggling through there. But on a slightly brighter note, we have Laura Hudson's roller skates, which is a really one of several pieces Laura has in the show. But there's a great story behind it about your grandma's roller skates. Laura, I don't know if you want to elaborate on that. Unmute.
Yeah, I think I've unmuted.
Yeah.
Am I there? It's quite a small painting, this one, and it's what you might call a breakout painting. It came from a larger piece called Catch-22, where I was intuitively painting this kind of totally amalgamation of a character, and I put little wheels on the feet, and it just reminded me of my grandmother. When in the 70s, we used to go and stay with our grandmother in the summer while my mum was working, and she was just this huge character. Her house was really Spartan. She was just uncomplicated northerner with huge hands, huge feet. Nothing was frivolous. Nothing that was unnecessary in her house at all. She used to wash the packets of bacon and things. She was just complete northern stoic. Anyway, this one summer she bought some roller skates with embassy coupons, and they were adjustable so that it would fit all three of us. But she just got a spanner out and opened them up, stuck them on her massive size 9 feet, and we pulled her up, and she just skated off like this incredible. She must have been 70 at the time, like big lady with skinny legs and massive feet, and she became like a teenager. She just was skating back and forwards, gliding around. I don't remember myself ever roller skating, but I just remember viscerally the sensation of her skating, and I just loved that that transformation that happened just by putting wheels on her feet. Mm-hmm. So that's how come that painting, just as simple as it is, because it's just that memory of that joyous kind of transformation.
Yeah, definitely. You can get that all from that painting. It's sort of full of a joy and freedom. Again, something that's we don't have so much of these days at the moment. But but opposite Laura's piece is Kate Murdoch's platform piece, which also relates to grandmothers. This piece by Kate is called Objectification, and there are a couple of videos on our Instagram that you can kind of fully see. So I've got a few images to try and depict what the platform area is. In the gallery, I commission works for this space, and it means that the artist can obviously create something very specific and very special. And Kate had been thinking about this work, which is about the passages of womanhood, really. And so it goes from girl to sort of woman to grandmother towards the end of the platform. And Kate's work is very much concentrating on sort of the of objects, but also how they sort of connect us to our sense of selves, but also our identity, our backgrounds, our culture. And, you know, there's on the dresser there's a group of figurines who have their mouths taped with some plaster. So there were loads of interesting and intriguing sort of details and objects about how we're meant to be as women when we're no longer seen as feminine, as well as we age terribly. But this idea of value and worth, and so about where we come from, and it being very particular as well to part of her own identity as well as the wider identity, really. Yeah, so, and Kate has a really fascinating way of working with objects, and the way that she recontextualizes them by putting them together, and the relationships then go on with those connections. You know, this perfect Barbie dolls and princesses and so on. And she's written quite a lot about it. She's a really fantastic blogger on Artist Newsletter. So if you want to read even more about the internal processes of her selecting work, and how she played with these ideas, really, you know, on the day of installation, there's just one day, so she had to put together a lot of these ideas beforehand, and then, you know, it's kind of really fascinating to watch people working on installations like this, because there will be tiny tweaks, and, you know, her partner Pete came, was a really good set of second eyes, and we talked a lot about it, and tiny things you wouldn't, you know, so it might look so perfectly placed, which it is, but it was just tiny adjustments all the time to make sure that there was just a right amount of space or colour or so on in the installation. And in that window that we saw, mirror rather, is Wendy's other piece that we have in the show, as you can see here. So I'm just going to bring on Paula to talk a little bit about Wendy, who sadly isn't with us. So part of the work was perfect for the show, but also it's incredibly important to kind of keep the legacy of what she was achieving and doing in her artistic career very much alive. As she'd also been in a show at Collyer Bristow Gallery with me before, and as has Paula. So Paula, if you're there still.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Great. So,
yes, I just sort of went over to my bookshelf to find this, actually. I don't know if can you see that?
Oh yeah. Okay, Murdoch. Yeah.
This is a close-up of one of these figurines of Kate's, and I have to say, it was just a kind of fantastic to have the Wendy's work reflected in the mirror that's in Kate's piece. This postcard was from a show called Disturbance, which Wendy and I think it probably wasn't the first show we curated together, but it was I think the first time we'd sort of carefully selected artists, and in fact, this was because of this show. That's how I met Kate as well, and we've been good friends ever since. But yeah, this postcard was also, I found it on, you know, as artists, we all have postcards on our wall or images of other artists that we admire. This was on Wendy's studio wall when we cleared it out after she died. So this is a really beautiful connection for me. Yeah, so I thought I'd just, you know, share that with you, first of all. My original plan was to read out her statement, which is on her website. So you'll hear her words about her work. And then perhaps I'll talk a little about my perception of her work and some of the conversations we used to have. So although it's in the third person, these are her words. Saunders' paintings are predominantly series of abstracted heads, experimenting in and exploring formal aspects of painting. Her latest series seeks out abstraction, partially stripping back figures to the underlying shapes. The paintings are contrasting mix of strong forms and understated figuration. And she says, I have been constructing these new painting supports specifically to act as carriers for a number of ideas relating to the reading of human countenance and emotion. I make the stretchers to represent a head shape. They are an evolved, abstracted representation of the human form, but are they portraits? Using a combination of surface and materials, I then attempt to evoke visual ideas of character, states of emotion, or some form of human expression. Sometimes they work well and activate a psychological reading merely with the addition of coloured paint, which taps into our memory or acts as a trigger about a person or people more generally. I experiment with ways that the materials can be used to drive these anthropomorphic representations, and where that can go in terms of representing either a state of mind, some form of behaviour, or ideas about the human condition. Wendy had I met Wendy in 2012 on an artist residency, and in fact I think that's when I first met you, Rosalind, as well. You were one of the guest speakers.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Yeah, yes, I have to say we didn't quite hit it off at first, but soon we kind of, you know, we formed a very good friendship and a very good working relationship. And although she'd sort of come to making painting relatively late in life, she was, you know, she didn't hang around. She was sort of working really hard and making up for what she saw as lost time. We curated several shows together, and I think over time we learned a lot from each other. She started off just using essentially black paint and was drawing quite realistic portraits from photographs. I was using really bright colours, and over time her work became more colourful. There's a couple of pieces that are actually fluorescent paint, and my work has maybe, at times at least, become a bit more subdued. And there are lots of kind of overlaps that I can see between our work. So it's kind of interesting to look back on that and see how kind of the effect of that relationship has had on both of us. But yes, Wendy was disagreed, but I always saw these works as self-portraits. And I think, you know, I'm kind of strong believer that most artists are making some kind of self-portrait. And she always disagreed. She didn't like to think of them, excuse me, as portraits at all. And they became, as you can see in these, increasingly abstracted. And the colour in this particular piece is taken from makeup, from foundation, and was made at City and Guild's art school, where Laura was also a student. So I don't know if, Laura, you want to chip in as well and say something about Wendy's work. But I had always said, you don't need to do an MA, Wendy, but she felt like she really wanted to do this. she got a place and was so excited to be, you know, starting on this course. And she did a year, and her work was suddenly transformed. And through conversations with people like, I think, Kira Bennett, I think, and Teresita, Laura, what's Teresita's surname?
Oh, I've forgotten her surname. I can't remember her surname. And
Yeah.
also Reese.
Reese Jones, is it?
Reese Jones.
Kira Bennett and Teresita. Anyway, it might come to me in a minute. But yeah, her work suddenly kind of took off, and there was this explosion of, you know, a lot of these small kind of abstracted heads with different kind of surfaces, and she really started to explore materials. She'd always been, I have to say, a little bit of a snob about the materials she used. She was a huge fan of John Jones. She lived just around the corner from John Jones and knew the family quite well. So I'm sure she'd be very sad to know that they've closed now. But yes, the interest in materials, she was looking at artists like Otis Jones, who she found hugely excited. And I remember she was delighted actually when on Instagram Otis Jones liked one of her pieces. That was a huge kind of triumph for her. So yeah, and another she'd been in a previous exhibition at Collyer, Bristow. I think, was it Strange Lands, Rosalind? And that she felt that was a huge achievement, and she was really proud to be part of that exhibition. So I'm sure she'd feel delighted to be part of this show as well, with such a great bunch of artists. So thank you, Rosalind.
Oh, you're really welcome. Yeah, it's a pleasure to have her works, and yeah, there is a video talking about that, showing Strange Lands and how much it meant to her. So really pleased to have been able to show some more of her work as it evolved so much over the sort of 2 years, and it was so exciting to sort of, it is so exciting to watch artists evolve in the ways that they do.
Could I just chip in about Wendy's work there?
Yes, do, yeah.
There was something that she said when we were at college together, because that's where I met her, and she was just the most incredible presence on the course. And one day she said to me that she was a minimalist and that I was a maximalist. She thought, because I was always chucking everything in, like trying to tell all the story in one go. And it really struck me so strongly, because I felt that she was a maximalist in life, as in she just put everything in and just went for everything and sort of was completely present, while her work was more and more reduced to a very clean, minimalist representation. But herself as a person was such a maximalist. I just thought that was a lovely contradiction.
Yeah, but also in terms of the curating, it's sort of she's opposite, almost like, not that Kate's a maximalist, but there is a lot of information going on there. But I loved the way that they speak to each other because of the girlish pink of the sort of triptych, you know, and they feel very, they really speak to me, you know, of people, of presence, of expression, as I say, but without an expression. And it's really interesting that they have that power to evoke that much in people, yeah, in their minimalist way. Yeah, thank you both. I will continue to move around the gallery. So going more into the themes of motherhood again, and Haidar. There's a little shot here, which I just have to minimize you all actually, so you can see. Yeah, so these are how they were positioned in the gallery, just to have some install shots whilst you're seeing it. certainly helps. This is how I want you to view it. But Aya's piece on the left-hand side was about these 7 items and the invisible labours attached to motherhood. It's called Highly Strung. So it's about it's been pulled from a series of 365 individually embroidered pieces, each one representing an act of invisible labour carried out for each day of the year. And it's about domesticity, labour and motherhood, and being a full-time mother and an artist. Also, there's sort of intertwining with feminism, with the embroidery, and her being at the centre of the work. So there's things like Pumped, and yeah, so she brought a selection of these pieces of clothing that she been working on, and made up this installation here. And then we won't go quite on to the piece on the right, because we then skip back in terms of your viewing to to Marion, Michell and Laura Hudson again. But there's a lot of interplay within the actual show that you can't see, but going between these ideas of youth and labour. And next to Aya is Marion Michel's piece. It's called there's my name gone. I think that when I'm sleeping, I must most perfectly resemble them. So these are also about childhood and that labour. The piece on the left of Marion's is all hand crocheted, and her work is very much about the bodily and also about familial relationships and the anxieties around the body. And the physical experience. So they're more moods and atmospheres. So there's elements of myth and fairy tale. I mean, when I saw the piece, I sort of thought about 3 siblings sort of laying upon one another somehow, with this sort of dissension and the shapes and the forms going down. And that's what I thought of siblings, and about those relationships and how you're tangled in to each other's narratives too. And thinking about sort of the idea of this connectivity, I suppose, which is really, really important. And then interestingly, we then go on to Laura's piece, which is again very much about the bodily and endurance and anxiety, and also childhood, because it's another memory for Laura in terms of that. But also, as you'll all see, very, very of the time, which is the piece is called What We're Most Afraid Of Has Already Happened. It seems very prophetic now, Laura. I mean, I don't know what you think.
Well, yes, I think there's a connection also with Charmaine here, because the process that I used to work.
Oh my God, it's the aliens are coming.
Oh, yeah, that's my phone. They arrived at through doodling in a way where I'm not in control of what images arrive, so they tap into things I don't necessarily know. So that's how they kind of connect with Charmaine, in the way that I'm really interested in anamnesis, which is recovering or rediscovering knowledge that you already have. And I guess that's why this painting ended up being called What We're Most Afraid Of Has Already Happened, because for me there's a history of hostility towards lesbian and gay, by transsexual people, and surveillance, and all these sort of things, and the kind of masking is a political thing. And the helmet also, because I'm on the autistic spectrum, I find noise pollution just horrendous. So the helmets and masking are often to do, I think, with that, for me personally, to do with shutting out the noise. So it's I mean, that painting just arrived out of weird things, and all the elements are to do with protections of some kind, whether it's the float band or the fingers crossed or the helmet. But there is somebody actually said to me that my paintings now, looking at them, they feel very future splaining. Yeah. It almost feels like my subject has kind of disappeared, because all these things that have been huge sources of anxiety for me have actually happened.
Yeah. 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 I think we all need some armbands at this point in time to get us through. what may or may not be the next phase of whatever's going on in the world. But thank you. We'll carry on over to Sikelela Owen's portraits. Again, the narrative of childhood is here. And Nathan Eastwood on the right. And again, actually, well, Laura, what you were saying also relates to anxiety, surveillance, introspection with sort of Nathan's piece on the right-hand side. And these two depictions of youth of a very different aspect, you know. So these were sat next to each other in the exhibition. And for me, sort of looking at two very different scenarios of childhood and what that might mean and where it might be. And when I was thinking about me, myself and I in the first stages when I was like emailing the artists and stuff, somebody was saying, or even telling people that people would say, so what's the next show? What's it about? I was saying it's called Me, Myself and I. And somebody said, oh, is it a show about narcissism and selfies? And I was like, no, not at all. No, that's the last kind of show I'd curate. And I'd been thinking about Sikelela's work in terms of these very tender portraits, also of a time before we were, where the world had not become so selfie obsessed, and you know, taking the perfect photograph, we used to take millions of photos, and occasionally some of them would turn out right and they'd be quite natural and spontaneous. And so I've been thinking about Sikelela's work here, Massey and Paloma, these sort of quiet moments, and they're from Sikelela's family photos, aren't they? She's here, nodding, yes. Yeah. Do you want to unmute yourself?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, sorry, I thought you were talking to us. Yeah, I was nodding. Yeah, they're my family. And actually they are fully grown women now. They're in their 40s, coming on a bit longer, but I think like ideas of memory and like I think there's something about like I think basically what happened, I'd lost a number of people earlier on in the year. Mm-hmm. So I think I was thinking about like how much you don't know about those you love. Yeah. And maybe like it sort of made me look at older photos and kind of trying to think about like who these people are to me and who these people were, and like yeah, so I really have an interest in kind of these moments that, you know, you take for granted. You look at images and they're both very accomplished women, and and just looking back at them, I just wanted to look back at them and these moments, especially because I think it's very like these particular images were quite a contrast to what I see them as now, and you know, sort of childhood awkwardness, legs crossed, and just and seemed very like when stripped back, you're just focusing on the figure and the image and them as individuals. So that was kind of the reason that I was looking at them, and I tend to look very much at like micro things and ideas of intimacy and empathy, and I think there's something, definitely now I think empathy is a good thing to have, and to be able to look at what someone is and realize that for most people, obviously one begins vulnerably, and and what, you know, we all begin, well, not we all begin, but we often begin in similar places. And there are lots of things that we work through, and then we come to these spaces. And I think for me, I come from a very large family. So, you know, this was actually when they were in Zimbabwe with my grandma, who I lived with for a year. So, you know, there's more formal photograph taking, and they were basically just taken before they immigrated to London and America respectively. And I suppose it's kind of that last photo, and these sort of figures who you consider part of your lives and part of your communities, even though they're not right on your doorstep. So definitely like, and in Zimbabwe I had not a coup recently. So I think lots of those kind of thoughts, this sort of idea of like, just the ideas of community and how, you know, they're not necessarily, the people you're close to are not necessarily close by sometimes. And also just, I'm always interested in trying to figure out what other people are thinking and mining that. And I suppose that's why they kind of feel very introspective sometimes, because you're trying to understand the figure, the subjects in it. That's how it goes. Yeah.
Wonderful. Yeah, gorgeous, and bring a certain sense of joy, I think, as at the same time of remembering our own moments of that in childhood, you know, of the dressing and having to present yourself, and, you know, awkward photos as well.
Well, yeah, actually, yeah, because prior to this, I was doing of my nieces who are, you know, I just realized that, like, the similarities. I mean, the repetitions, isn't it? The repetitions of these, you know, like you said, getting your Sunday best on and taking your photo. Yeah, and I like my nieces who are in Sheffield, and they like always love, like, they're performers and they have to dress up and things, and just, yeah. So I kind of just that whole, there's an occasion, but it's not a massive occasion, and I think that there's something about quiet, not quite occasions that is like the lifeblood of my work. I like those moments which are very easy to pass over in a photo album, and
yeah, those quiet moments.
Yeah.
Which takes us neatly on to these pieces too. Another piece by Laura, again, an expression of where we are now in our hazmat suits. But this sort of quiet, there was a relationship as well in terms of these were sort of adjacent to one another in the gallery, and that solitude that Sikelela was saying, you know, is very much present in the piece by Nathan on the right-hand side. Of those, yeah, those moments that are maybe uneventful but profound at the same time, perhaps, or maybe not. Maybe it's totally just being absorbed in the rhythm of a washing machine in Nathan's piece. But yeah, there's quite a few of these drawings by Laura. They're sort of a series, aren't they? I can see he's on the above your door in your studio. The one that's, or is it might be another version of one. Yeah. But yeah, it again feels very oddly prophetic to see that that drawing at this particular time and protection, and thinking about protection of that baby in that suit.
Can you see the dark? Can you see the dark thing up in the top corner?
Yeah.
That's actually a real hazmat suit. These drawings came out of some deep memory. I didn't know I'd seen them. They were issued by the government to babies under 2 years old. That you were supposed to put the baby in case of a nuclear attack or gas bomb. And I actually found one after I'd drawn these. So I've actually got one in my studio now.
It's always good to be prepared.
They couldn't protect you in a month of Sundays. They're open flaps of canvas.
Ridiculous. Yeah, that is a very interesting oxymoron, isn't it, really? Very much of the time of having very little protection when we most needed it, or when our, you know, hospital staff or care homes needed it. So again, who would have thought about that back in when I was talking to you all in November and December about this show? Yeah, they've become. Laura, do you feel like they've taken on a new political element now as well? I know that was in your mind at the same time of the sort of politics of the hazmat suit and things like that, but
it was always my intention. It's I think particularly with those suits, they had concertinas in the arm that the mother was supposed to press to get air into the suits, but they were made of heavy rubber. You had to be very strong to actually press the concertina. And I remember seeing a Second World War film really long time ago, where the father comes home from work and the mother's sitting at the table crying because she doesn't have the strength to press the bellows. And it just made me think how horrendous that governments and around the world are sort of bombing and creating sort of weapons of mass destruction, and the onus or the responsibility of safety gets put onto women who have got no involvement in making those destructive courses of action or materials. I just found it quite horrendous.
Yeah.
So they've always had that intention from me, but I don't know how other people see them now. I don't know.
Well, they just, like everyone's, for me, it really works on so many levels now as it did before, if you see what I mean. So it's that added element, really. Yeah, which takes us neatly on to Conor Rogers' piece, also about rich and things that, well, haven't been part of daily life for a while. Anyway, these are absolutely tiny, 15 by 10 centimeters, each of these betting slips on actual betting slips. These are the real thing. So they're sort of these tiny jewels and about Conor's identity and growing up in what the betting office to him was like his holy place, and making a pilgrimage there with his granddad every weekend, and those deeper connections. So yeah, it's all painted. You can marvel at that intricacy. And Conor was here. He was also painting. I don't know if you're still here, Conor, because I can't see the whole gallery of people. Otherwise, it will obliterate my.
Can you see me now?
Yes. Yeah. So.
Hey.
Hi. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about, all these pieces, and they contain so many sort of stories, don't they, and hopes and desires of that. I'll maybe win the next one, and obviously then being around people that do win and don't win, and that environment, really.
Yeah. The work's very symbolic. Personal symbolism is important in my work. When I generally see objects or see the mysticism of how we live our lives, lived experience especially. So it's a social commentary in a way. These pieces came in direct response actually to a memory of drawing on backs of beer mats in pubs when I was about 5 or 6. And then obviously through experience and going into these places and these spaces and the people that occupy them and the sort of continuous rituals, as you mentioned, that I experienced as a kid, which sort of embedded into me or ingrained into who I was, led to me to think of how I could incorporate all that sort of idea of who I was and what these places and the people that occupied them, what they represented to me, and how I could sort of figure out my sense of self through that. Led to me to actually go, these objects could hold a nice paint, and the framework of it and the sort of the correspondence between image and objects and the symbolism between the two and what they represented was really important. So it's quite an easy process and a really enjoyable series of paintings, which is still ongoing. I'm still making. There's 3 depicted here, but I've got about 7 or 8 betting slips, and I'm hoping to have a show later on in 2021, which is sort of expanding on that idea of what the betting office represents and the culture that used to visit these spaces represented to me. So yeah, I mean, really enjoyable work. What I think would be good, actually, it might be a bit random, is if I read you a poem, because I've started doing poetry off the back of paintings, and I use them to correspond together. So I've wrote a poem about these pieces, and you'll get because it's hard to unravel what's in my head, and sometimes there's limitations to how we can sort of convey ourselves, and that's why my language of painting does it quite in a literal form. But then there's also the concepts behind it, which sometimes people aren't really understanding, or there's certain areas of why I'm doing it, which people never really understand or see. So I think if you let me read a poem now, do you mind me doing that?
Yeah, please, go ahead.
No? All right, let me do it, because so the poem's about the betting slip and the betting office and the painting itself, but also the reasoning behind why I made it. Are able to expand a bit more in the form of poetry, which I've sort of started doing with recent. So I'm going to hold the phone. So if you see my rolls of chins, don't laugh at me. 1 second. Okay, so the poem's called What Are the Odds? Is it a memory or a dream? The social kings and their queens, dancing, turns and boozy binges, for families with doors without hinges. Your fleeting love on Saturday mornings, cash out of your impulses, they will drive your engine to the ground. It's a mutual habit of losing a pound. Now Deadeye's got a 10 pence 6 cents. SES Dave was once a gold medal winner. a commendation for being a sinner, a Malky's grim gargle, a consistent routine of cleansing his palate. It smelt like cockles and John Smith's. He always landed his round robin, though. To some, his life was full of disdain. A contradiction came from fags in the rain. And Alan finally wedged it in, under the coin for the bandit and the bravado. He came from the land of the brave. These places are us. These places are we. These places set free. These places are the faces of time and different spaces. The ritual begins. Bedrooms to the bookies, bookies to the boozers, boozers to the bedrooms. Is it repetition or life cycle? The circle of life for people who sharpened a knife. The holy place. Only these pilgrims seek God's mighty golden hall. Must be robbing Peter to pay Paul. So summon up your spirits. The barman must be a shaman. He's casting voodoo curses and making magic potions. His pill pints has them speaking in tongues and walking funny. Then back to the bookies to throw away more money. Now you chew back a cry when you wave your acca goodbye. So loosen up your tie, the butcher has brought you another pork pie. So what are the odds of uncovering that they aren't horrible sods? Now what are the odds? Taste of victory to replace time's endless dichotomy. Now what are the odds of letting go and stepping forth? Now what are the odds of loving all that we stand for? That's the one.
Wow, thank you so much.
Sweet. Yeah, just dabbling in a bit of poetry at the moment, and
Yeah,
really quite freeing now actually, because since the show, I've managed to sort of get things down in text and expand on my ideas a lot more, and they're working together a lot more, sort of poetry and spoken word and the actual painting. So I started to realise my practice isn't necessarily just about painting. It's about an idea or language and storytelling, and that can be expanded or translated into many different forms, which I'm really enjoying, doing new things and sort of taking some risks.
yeah, no, it's great.
Thanks, Linnet.
It's great to have those accompanying one another, because they do really, really work. And you see a lot more of Conor doing some poetry on his Instagram, which I highly recommend. If anyone watching this does want to connect with any of the artists here today, you will find them on our Instagram, so you can follow them and have conversations of your own. Thank you so much, Conor. I wasn't expecting to have live poetry, so that's added bonus.
That's it. You got VIP treatment. All right.
Thank you very much.
No, well, thank you.
We'll carry on with a piece that's right near to Conor's, which again, the idea of them placed together, If I'm Not There, which is the title of this piece by Erica Winston, sums up different associations and contexts in terms of maybe that absence of when somebody is in the thralls of, a betting shop, and the accompanying things that sort of Conor describes, really, of that kind of traction of experience and memories too. So this is Erica Winston's. It's a very built-up surface, and Erica often collaborates with her daughter in her work, and this is based on a Bob Dylan sort of film that also was part of the performance. So Erica, like Conor, works between performance and video and painting. So Erica, I don't know if you'd like to say a few words. I know you were there before in the gallery.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you, Rosalind. It was great coming after Conor, because my mother describes my grandfather as having been a professional gambler. So that was a nice little link. I guess, I've worked for a long time with my daughter, who's now 24 and a performer herself. In this piece, the way she was involved is that I filmed her. I showed her a little bit of a documentary about Dylan, and it's a scene where he is reading and sort of ad-libbing and making a sort of a poem up on the spot as he reads off a pet shop wall. And he's really playing with the words and what they mean and the order of them. And I found the same spot in London where he was filmed doing this. And I showed Anna the film and took her there and asked her to do what she remembered him doing. And I then worked from that footage of both the real Dylan and my daughter, and fused those performances together. And the letters forms that you can see are the names of some of the films that I've drawn the painting from. And one of them is Charlie Chaplin's The Kid, which is why you can see a faint thing of kid. And I was also, which is also working where Charlie Chaplin worked with this young child actor, and it was very much about the relationship of an orphan who he takes in as a tramp, and the relationship that develops between them. And I guess I'm very interested in relationships, positive relationships between adults and children, and also, I suppose, about the child in the adult as well. And I love the way in this performance of Dylan that he becomes very childlike as he's doing the rhyme. And I work by looking at these films and mixing them together hundreds of times and drawing from them and sort of combining, working from the film, moving and pausing it. And I have actually painted the titles underneath so that people could sort of unpick the sources if they want to. And then there's other bits of writing that are coming from the dialogue that's being said or the songs that are being sung, which for me are all part of what I'm interested in. And there are little figures which you sort of need to be probably in front of it to see. It's a little bit difficult to see. But they, I suppose it's very much about the fragility of the relationships that we form, and and trying to sort of capture them, trying to sort of hold on to them in some way. And very much, I guess, about sort of the value and importance of communication across different generations, which is why it's been great to be in a show like this one. Yeah, and the value of the attempt, I suppose, that even though it may seem ridiculous sometimes to perform if you're not a performer, you know, to actually, for me to start to take part in my own films and put myself in front of the camera, which is what I've been doing a lot more lately, feels acutely embarrassing. But yet at the same time, I think there's a real value to it for me, and maybe to put myself in that position as well, to feel what it's like and to learn from it and to work with the unexpected and to sort of try and identify. And also because I do a lot of this sort of revisiting and finding the actual place where the original filming happened, but returning there sometimes 30 years later and seeing what's changed and also seeing what's still the same. And I guess these are some of the things that I'm really interested in the work.
Thank you very much for telling us so much about it. Yeah, you do really need to experience them as well. This is not quite as justifying the original work, but yeah, the sort of excavations of it as well, like plumbing, also your own sort of memory and history and family relationships as well. It's very, very physical in the piece itself as well, you know, bearing down on the past as well. Which takes us very neatly to the painting that's right next to Erica's, which is Paraffin Man by Ken Kiff. And next to that is Broughton Birnie. And the only reason it's small, that painting next to it, is to try and give you a sense of scale, but actually the painting on the right by Broughton Birnie is actually very, very small. And coincidentally, Ken Kiff taught Kevin Broughton, who works in collaboration with Fiona Birnie. There are several pieces by Ken Kiff, and it was one of the artists that, again, I have a long list of artists in my mind, but very much encapsulated the essence of me, myself, and I. You know, you've got the three portraits going on here. like the id and the ego and the alter ego and everything like that. And it's sharp and sitting next to Erica's sort of also the idea of absence as well. So it's quite a despairing one. And I was really lucky to meet Anna Kiff, who's on the video call, through Graham Crowley. He wrote a really wonderful thing about Ken's work, and we were very lucky to borrow these works from John Talbot, who has the most major and amazing collection of Ken Kiffs. But yeah, as well, that really sings to this point in time. But Graham wrote, he painted in his work a society in which harmony and understanding coexist with incomprehension and isolation. He painted about anxieties, his fractured sense of self and his place in the world. Simultaneously fantastic, delightful and disturbing, his paintings have both the emotional range and power which permits the paintings to simultaneously appear both joyful and oppressive, harnessing the perpetual, involuntary and random maelstrom that is the inner voice, the internalized chatter, the running commentaries that occupy our quieter moments, the stories we tell ourselves. It's a simultaneously delightful and perplexing mix of the Arcadian and dystopian has come to epitomise his work. And they also have a wonderful presence in themselves, like Erica's and all the other works, you know, to actually physically stand in front of them and fall in love. And there's several pieces in the show, and some are delightful and some are anguished, and it's sort of encapsulating that spectrum of emotions and feelings that we all have in our complex times. And then Broughton, they've got several little works, and the one next to them is The General, and he's sort of a very different type of character, as you can tell by the name, but it's sort of inspired by Otto Dix's War Cripple paintings, as it's called. But this idea of the general face obscured by a sheet has no knowledge of where he is heading, yet continues to push forwards to his unknown cause, taking all with him. And if that reminds you of any leaders in the free world, then you'd be right. Which then accompanied at the same time by that last sentence, we go on to around the gallery to this piece by Linnet Rubaya, which is an incredible portrait, and it's called Untitled 8. And when I spoke to Linnet about it, we talked about Untitled can often be sometimes a stand-in for artists that can't think of a name, but it's very purposeful in Linet's work, reminding us, the audience, of the inequalities and corrupt power that generals across the world are administering and not listening to voices. And so her work is often about referencing and highlighting the importance of Black Lives Matter, essentially, and that's not what it was called at the time, but of course that's the underlying purpose of the work that she's making, and about stories experienced globally by Black African descendants. And as a child of the African diaspora herself, you know, her search for home within that. And it's also it's a memory portrait, but it also encapsulates an experience, but also the vulnerability, I think, which already was really powerful before all the horrors around the world of George Floyd and everything that's going on, the inequalities that are being faced by people of BAME backgrounds, is a super powerful thought, and about representing the underrepresented. But yeah, and it's quite small as well, which you'll see. I've got a couple of install shots so you can see where we've come from and where we're going. And you'll see the next part of another install shot. But yeah, and then right next to that is, again, these other characters that are putting the sheets over their head. They're not looking, they're not listening. But at the same time, that sort of the portrait that Linnet has is of a child and sort of thinking about child games and hide and seek. And I remember a story about a friend's child that would put the sheet over their head and think that they couldn't be seen. But also that whole hide and seek of trying to get people to take responsibility for their actions, but people facing away, which takes us appropriately to King Baby on the right-hand side by Eleanor Morton, omnipotent, childish and narcissistic, a character from an alternative world, she says, but to be honest, we all know a few king babies that are present in positions of power across the world right now. And with Eleanor's, it's often these meditations on morality, the psyche and possibility of evil, and also what happens when you get power and how that can be corrupting. So there are these political resonances, again, that word, resonance, I'm going to say it a lot of times today, that are there. So there you can see the sort of sequence of how you would see them in the gallery. And also, you know, Linnet is then also looking out onto King Baby, you know, and that was a very purposeful thing of the placement of the works. As you go around, you then have the sort of the fairy tales element starts to sort of come in more strongly with this other piece by Kiff and Sikelela. This is her niece that she spoke about earlier in her ballerina dress, really dressing up. And it's sort of, there's fairy tales always have that ominous edge that Kiff is, but also sort of enjoying the joy in Sikelela's niece in her sort of, again, unconsciousness of being a child when we have less of these anxieties, hopefully. And in the gallery, we then move into rooms that are situated around the gallery, and we come to Marie Harnett, so carrying on with a sort of macabre fairy tale, I suppose. Again, Marie Harnett's piece is probably about as big as what you can see on this screen, depending on how big a screen is. And it's just a drawing. It's a tiny, tiny little drawing. It's 8.2 by 15 centimeters, and it's called Wall. And for me, it looked a lot like a scene from Wizard of Oz, but it's actually a slightly darker story, isn't it, Marie?
Yeah, it's actually from a film called Crimson Peak, but I've not seen it. I don't know. I work from film, but I don't tend to watch the films that I'm drawing just because it's nice to not have their story. I'm using them as a vehicle to explore something, but I wanted to layer a few images because there's something about, you can kind of see it a bit from a distance, but as they're small you need to go up close, and it can be, you can see this kind of fabric or something really nice about it, then you're pulled in and then you're like, oh, what's that? And there's this kind of, I think, almost an unpleasantness about it, or something a bit creepy. And yeah, I kind of, it's quite nice to explore that, especially in relation to memory. I think we very rarely remember things accurately, or we have these little fragments, and this felt a bit like that, a bit like childhood and a bit like trying to recall something, and you just get these kind of fragments. You never really remember, say, a whole day. It's all this kind of little pieces, and I kind of wanted to play a bit with that with this work, I think. And yeah, the reason they're so small is because I want them to feel really intimate. So some of the drawings are like the size of a postage stamp, and then most of them about the size of a playing card. This one was a bit bigger, 15 centimeters. So yeah, it's to get that intimacy, and so you have a very personal relationship with it. You have to go up close to see it, and to kind of hopefully get a bit of an emotional reaction with it. I hope so, at least, anyway.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, there's a lot to see in it and to keep looking at, and I think that's really important. It's yeah, very exquisite. Just like a collection of dreams almost at the same time. And
yeah, kind of the images dissolve into one another, which I kind of think it works as one image, but yeah, it's that there are a few in play there, so it's kind of, you can kind of pick out and I guess choose which bits to focus on as well. And it's part of the reason I work with pencil is because it's got fragility to it, and that you kind of sense that, you know, if you take an eraser, it's gone, and it's very silvery as well, especially if you tilt it in a certain light, it gleams silver, and that it adds this kind of jewel-like and very fragile element to it, which is quite important to me.
Yeah, no, it's exquisite, as I say. Thank you so much. I'm just aware of the time, so I'm going to kind of go a bit more rapidly through so that a couple of people that are here on the meeting can talk a little bit about their work, but we go into this room with Marie to more Fables and Stories by Eleanor and Margarita. This piece is actually a very huge piece that covers the entire wall. So opposite Marie's actually, so kind of different dimensions for sure, and different stories as well. I'm aware we have Manon here because we spoke earlier. This was a set of 3 works in the same room, this, and there's another piece by Eleanor Morton. Oh gosh, how embarrassing. But yeah, this is one of Manon's pieces from a series of works that she's been working on. This is Andrew. And so this room that they were all situated in focuses more on the identity part of the show as well. So when you have the separate rooms in the gallery, it allows for you to draw upon the themes like we just saw with Marie and Margarita's. And this idea, I loved also the joining together of these 3 works that were about the decoration of the skin, in the way that people use clothes or indeed tattoos to be an identifier of many of their feelings or evocations of themselves. But yeah, maybe you could tell us a little bit, Manon.
Sure. So this is a portrait of Andrew, and it is part of a series called Altered that I've been working on for the last 2 to 3 years, and it's made up of about 30 different portraits of people who are physically altered. And I started this project because I wanted to champion people who are often marginalised and seen to be other. And throughout all my research, I couldn't find any portraits that really showed the beauty and gave an opportunity to people to rediscover themselves. And that's what really became quite clear early on in the project as I started capturing people's portraits, was this therapeutic value of photography, and how we could use that to redefine our new state of being, our new physical identity. And what's really wonderful about this project is that everyone's been captured in the nude, their naked portraits. So there's no sort of, they're quite timeless, except for the fact that people have got tattoos. A lot of people have got tattoos, and you can sort of, put people in time and place because of that. But there's no sort of identity of their socio-economic status or anything like that. It's very homogenized, and everybody is equal. And it's been a really wonderful project to work on, and I'm grateful to be sharing it here with you guys.
Yeah, that's you. I mean, it's so evocative. I mean, yeah, and I loved placing it with Georgina's piece as well, and that another sort of expression. And the portrait on the right is of Hankin. Oh, no, sorry, what was his name? Jenkin, sorry. I don't know where that name came from. But Jenkin, he's a natural art student at the Royal Academy. This is his evoking his identity. This is how he lives and dresses in his everyday life, and how we now have those freedoms to be able to express ourselves in so many different ways, whether it's in the clothes we wear, as I say, the tattoos we have, or in the artwork that we make that was also part of our own showing of our own identities and interests and concerns. A bit like the portraits, they're all sort of portraits of ourselves at the same time as being maybe portraits of other people too, and our passions and things that resonate. Again, that word. Tried to find an alternative in the thesaurus, but it wasn't anything that was quite as right. So I'll move on just to make sure we get all the works. Thank you so much, Manon. And Eleanor was also in that room, and this is from Janet and John, and this girl is also descending into the underworld, but again there was this decorative and also that balance of steering into those places as well. And again, to try and show you the different scales, we have Broburn on the left-hand side, and this is The Alchemist, and then next to it is Will Harman's of the Pub. Again, we all need a drink. But this idea of this quite chaotic alchemist, and there's a lot going on with both pieces, and with Broburn's there's lots of sort of stories within it, and there's people being carried away under tables. And particularly now, it feels very again, of our time, but the chaoticness, I suppose, that sort of in some of Broburn's, but and with Will is sort of depicting what, the visual twisted diary that Will has, and it's when he used to work in a Wetherspoons and the collection of people that were there, and maybe that sort of very what feels quite strange because we haven't been around people. Well, I haven't been, I don't know about you all, but or gone to a pub in a very long time, but this kind of collapsing of memories and characters together. Bygone ages, really. And these are two more, which I think is maybe somebody being wheeled away from the pub in this piece on the left-hand side by Broburn. But the idea of, it's called chairing, this particular piece, but ludicrous, the political campaigns that have developed over the past couple of years, and the candidate is supported by his confused and bewildered entourage and being propelled forward with his collection of crazy ideas. No plan, no control, just the desire to get to the finishing post first, which again has a political element and sort of the uncertainty of the future and the uncertainty of what we've all been living with. And on the right-hand side is another piece by Eleanor Morton, which is called Dung Beetle, which is a sort of Sisyphean quest of another type. And basically this idea of the dung beetle is that it basically gets a ball and tries to roll it backwards over the dune, and it keeps on falling over. It can't see what, this beetle doesn't know what it's doing, and it can't see where it's going, but navigating by the stars, which takes us back to Charmaine's Star Lady at the beginning, the cosmology, and feeling that very much epitomized also the artist's journey, which can feel quite Sisyphean, of being endless sort of trying to go up a hill with a ball falling on your head all the time, but trying to push forward anyway, and then also evocative of the wider experience of like we're trying to go somewhere without knowing where we're going. And then there's another piece just next to that by Eleanor, which is about Creek, and it's again these stories about, it's actually based on sort of a photograph of Charles Manson's about where do you go from the point of committing that sort of horrendous acts, and how people were really enchanted by this story and by him. But yeah, and it's also about precipices, I suppose, that in her work, which takes us to Paul Benjamin's and Ken Kiff. So they were shown in this way. I'm just going to minimise the gallery. So Paul Benjamin's is the two paintings on either side of the Ken Kiff. And this is about a personal struggle. And it was, so Paul died of cancer as well. And these were from his cancer diaries that he made whilst he was undergoing treatment up to the end of his life. And Paul was, he was my mentor and he was my friend, and was so hunting for the right moment to show the work, because it's the cancer diaries. There's 7 sketch pads, I've seen them and cried over them, and they're really poignant and they're perfect, and they're about this journey, this political sort of personal struggle. And then there's sort of Dahlias by Ken Kiff in the middle is sort of that transition piece of like a place of pathos, of wanting to take care of somebody, the son that's behind that kind of little guy creature there in the middle, seemed incredibly poignant to me. And there is a book that we had at the gallery, and that is for sale. His wife, Jackie Benjamins, who helped me with getting the work, created a book out of some of, well, a lot of the diaries, and yeah, that's on sale if you're interested, and goes towards raising some money for Macmillan. So yes, that was a very poignant part of the wall, because as I say this, we're coming to the end of the actual exhibition, and we have Waiting Room by Laura Hudson here, which again paired with Paul's piece, and with current waiting room scenarios, feels incredibly articulate about this time. And I'm going to keep going so that we can have some questions at the end. If people are still around, I realise it's 1 o'clock. So there's just 2 more pieces to show you. So this is the final room that I would take you to, going from the place of quite a sad place in a way, of waiting rooms and people that we all might have lost being in those places. But yeah, thinking about these pieces of sort of companionship, really. Even though on the left-hand side it does look very like a sad companionship, but thinking about closeness and intimacy again. You know, how much we maybe won't take for granted some of those simple things in life. The conversations with a neighbour that's in Nathan Eastwood's, but and needing to depend on people and also help people in this time. So the piece on the left-hand side is called Unlikely Angel, and thinking about all of our unlikely angels that we've possibly all had over the last few months, feels like a kind of really important way to end this part of the talk. So I just want to thank all the artists for coming and contributing, and everyone for joining. Obviously, it was meant to finish at 1. Nothing's going to happen to the recording. So, you know, if you want to stick around and ask a couple of questions, the audience members, you can unmute yourselves and I will bring up the gallery and we can have a bit of a chat for 15, 20 minutes, whatever, really. I'm not going anywhere. But, yeah, I'll bring you all up and then you can unmute. And what I would just suggest, because there's quite a few of us, is just maybe raise your hand so I can see you better. And then we're not all talking over one another. Linnet joined us. Didn't realise. I couldn't see once I started he was joining us. So, yeah. So, does anyone have any questions? Just do the gallery view. I can see everyone. Oh, there you go. And you can all see one another sorted. Oh, David's here. Hi, David. So David also wrote a piece for AN about the show. Was that helpful after you've already written it? You had lots of interesting points to raise. I don't know if you want to unmute yourself. I can unmute you, I think. I'm trying to unmute you. Maybe you can. Oh, there you go.
That's no, I listened in just to hear other people, really. It's good to know that I've touched on bits that were intended to be there. But it's interesting to hear people go through the way they make things and what they do with things. But one of the things I'm sort of interested in too is actually the look. I mean, it perhaps come across in what I wrote, but the look of things. It's like the aesthetics as well as the content, which is sort of harder to write about. The grandma's roller skates one, which is very puzzling, and it may be an oversimplified question, but I wonder sometimes why people paint the way they do and how their images come. Because I'll go on just a little bit more. I do think that, particularly with myself, and I came across an artist called Richard Forster a while ago who he draws very, very detailed and laborious images in his little studio on his own. And it struck me that one of the things that we're doing is actually making an environment for us to survive in by doing these things. They kind of confirm who we are. Do you know what I mean? And that's maybe why people do particular things. Well, I'm beginning to go around in circles now, but I wanted to see what other people said about this stuff and to listen, basically, which has been very good for me. Thank you.
Yeah, David wrote a review based on not actually seeing the show, but having to look at my images and having conversations a little bit about the work. And so masterfully done. You led the way in the first online review, I think, and trying to piece together my thinking and all of your works in a sort of Dropbox folder essentially, which is
Yeah.
together than it might look. Anna, did you have anything that you wanted to, or Linnet, if you're still here, that's you've got, just having a look at the chat. Okay, yeah, Anna, did you want to say anything? Or my inspiration, what was my inspiration? Somebody's asked. I really felt it was, I did mention, but like me, myself and I just felt very relevant, I think, historically and politically, of thinking about people's and identity. And I hadn't done a show about identity in that quite figurative way. This is sort of my most figurative show that I've shown at the gallery. And I work a lot with the idea of the fact that it's situated in a law firm. And then there's another sort of layer of, when people come to a law firm, they're often wanting to have resolution to problems and struggles that are about their identity, whether that's deciding to get a divorce or selling a house or whatever it is. And so I like that kind of layering, really. And it just was, as soon as the name came, I just knew immediately, you know, all these artists that are part of the show, and how they were defining identity in such a sort of myriad ways and in such interesting, intriguing ways, that threading them all together was a joy, really. You know, and my show is always pretty expansive, you know, lots of artists, lots of works, knitted together in this way, I suppose, to use yet another thread analogy. Yeah. The questions in case. Everyone's saying thank you. Yeah, does anyone else want to say anything? Or we can just stop. But yeah, in case any of the artists want to ask another artist to work, but I can, yeah. No? Oh, good. Well, I will then let you all go and have some lunch. This will be available online at some point. There will also be an online catalogue, which we wanted to wait until we did this video before we published that. So Michaela Nettle, our thanks to her for putting together the catalogue. That's looking very beautiful. I've seen it. There will be an updated foreword on that as well from myself, and include your review, David, as well. So thank you so much for that. It means a lot that you all turned up, and it means a lot to me to have shown the artist's work. I'm really grateful for you all that turned up to listen to it. So it was a pleasure. I'm going to try and screen grab some of these lovely comments for the catalogue, but you can all go. You can all end your own meetings, and I hope to see you all again in the not too distant future.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Rosalind.
Bye, thank you.
Thank you.
See you, Rosalind.
Yeah.
Thank you.
See you guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Oh, well done. I didn't do that, Laura. Screen grab it. Thank you.
See you later.
See you.